Hey, how's everybody doing today? So we are going to get into now, and this is video number 3, in the anxiety series. So I want to teach you, I want to support you, work with you in your journey of anxiety, coping skills. Now, coping skills, really what that means is some way to manage, to tame that bad boy we call anxiety. And really before we even talk about coping skills, we want to acknowledge our triggers. We want to acknowledge how the anxiety comes out. And the reason we want to do that is so we have an appropriate coping skill. So an example of this, before we even get into this whole video series or video, is let's say that my anxiety is where I am sitting down in my doctorate class and I'm trying to take a test, but my mind goes into, Juan, you've invested a lot of time, a lot of money. You cannot mess this up. You can't do that. So my mind is in that rabbit hole. And the question is asking something about, some kind of clinical question. Well, there's not a connection there because my mind's in the rabbit hole. There's a clinical question being asked, and my anxiety is, just really messing with me at that moment. So then comes in the question of an appropriate coping skill, right? And that moment of coping skill of doing, let's say, jumping jacks, that probably wouldn't be very appropriate, right? Juan stands up and he's doing jumping jacks. The instructor's like, what's going on here? Right, so that's where I kind of want to work with you. I want us to look at, A, what are coping skills? What purpose do they serve? And then B, or A, what purpose do they serve? And then B, what are these coping skills that we can utilize? So first things first, there are so many coping skills. And what's beautiful about the field of mental health is that there's so many clinicians out there who are just creating new ones. Or they're digging into history. They're looking at like Buddhist practices and saying, hey, that stuff worked and it worked then. Let's see if we can play with it and see how it works now. So the purpose of a coping skill is to reduce the severity of what you're feeling and in hopes to eliminate it if possible. So that if I am going through an anxiety reaction, triggered by X, right, some kind of variable, then I want my coping skill to reduce my symptoms. Let's say my symptoms are rapid heart rate, right? My heart rate went from a resting of 60 to I'm like getting the hundreds. Well, I want that coping skill to drop me down. And let's say the next one is that I am not breathing correctly. I'm doing like shallow breaths. Then the next coping skill, I want it, the purpose, I want it to give me a comfortable, healthy rhythm in my breathing. So that's kind of the purpose there that I want you to think about, as far as whenever you're walking in your journey of anxiety, I want you to think about, okay, here's my triggers. This is what my anxiety is. And then now in this video, we're going into the coping skills, the ways that I can reduce its severity. And the point of reducing the severity of the anxiety is so that you're able to function. Such as like if I'm in this video, right, and I'm having it here with you and I'm sharing information with you, but let's say in the background, my anxiety goes into imposter syndrome. Right? Where it's like, you shouldn't be on here sharing all this information. You're not smart enough. You're not educated enough, whatever it may be, right? So that's really pushing me to get anxious, to get overwhelmed. I may engage in a coping skill that reduces the severity of it, right? So that I'm still able to be present with you and to function with you because I'm taming it. And there's like interesting, at least I think about it, there's interesting medications out there, not related to anxiety, but somewhat do the same thing. So an example is, I want you to think about your life. Have you ever had like a bee sting or an allergic reaction and you get really, really itchy? Well, you can take, I think, Benadryl. And I'm not a medication provider, not a psychiatrist, but I'm thinking that it's Benadryl that I took, right? So you take this medication and then you notice that you're not as itchy anymore. But you know that it's still there. It's just, it reduces that severity, the strength of that reaction, of that symptom, which allows the person to function, to be in a meeting without having to scratch wherever they need to scratch. That may be a silly example, but to me, it makes really good sense. And maybe when you look at your coping skills, it could apply in that manner. So now let's kind of get into a couple of coping skills. Again, there's tons of them. And I'm going to share in the link below a course that I offer to tame your anxiety without medication, which you're going to have an array of coping skills, really giving you exactly what you need to be able to live your life knowing that you have anxiety, but having the appropriate, set tools to navigate through life, functioning, thriving, having a lot of smiles and a lot of success. So the coping skills I want to share with you, and I have these written down, so my eyes are moving down, is breathing. Now, people are like, oh, come on, dude, I breathe all the time. I know how to breathe. Yes, we do breathe all the time, hence why we are alive. But there's a difference between a therapeutic system of breathing. Right now I'm doing just standard respirations in and out. Well, what if I, for 8 seconds, let's just say, take a deep breath, I raise, right? I raise my upper frame, I bring that air in, and then I exhale. I'm not gonna do it here because the mic is right here, but I exhale. That's very different. It's noticeable different, right? You notice the difference because this whole video series I've been breathing a certain way. Then all of a sudden I changed it. So doing that type of breathing, what happens is that you have, and this is where statistics of research into psychology looks at, you have a reduction in your heart rate, right? The rate of the heart is reducing. You have a reduction in blood pressure, a reduction in muscle tension, which is a fun fact. Those are symptoms that take place when we get triggered. Often when people feel anxious, they'll say, man, my heart rate was out of control. I could literally feel it, coming out of my chest. Or we go get a checkup at a physician during a panic attack and our blood pressure is just way up. Another one could be where muscle tension. A lot of people say, man, I just got this creak in my neck or my back feels a certain way. And, things are fine. I didn't work out. So then I sit down with them. I dig deep in that clinical session. And then we sit back and we go, I think you're stressed. I think you've got some anxiety taking place. And then by the end of the session, we've got a whole notebook written down of all of the things that are happening that all have an arrow connecting to anxiety. Hence why that person is feeling that symptom of muscle tension. So again, that's why breathing is such a beautiful, beautiful coping skill. All we need to do is learn how to do it effectively. The next one I want to share with you is journal writing. And people sleep on this one. It's like, I don't want to journal. I don't want to write. It works. It's worked for so long. There are different platforms of journal writing. Like you can get a journal that tells you exactly what to write on. You can get a journal with a blank slate, blank sheet of paper. You can get a journal where it's a drawing. You can get a journal where you make the drawing, right? You can get a journal that's a coloring book. But the purpose is that you emotionally express what's in here out there. Or you express based off a prompt to pull you away from how you're feeling. And then the last one I want to share with you is a stop sign. You're like, okay, stop sign? I know what a stop sign is. Yes, you know what a stop sign is. Now, stop sign tells us to stop. And you're like, duh, I know that, Juan. So here's what I want you to look at. Whenever we feel anxious, we are driving in like a Ferrari going too fast. We don't feel in control. We feel on edge, restless, heart rate's going up, we're sweating, we feel tired, lightheaded, all of these symptoms. So then whenever you get to a stop sign, you stop. And I want you to go into this exercise. I want you to think about it. You stop at that stop sign, and I want you to picture exactly what it looks like, the color, the shape, how shiny it may be. And then after doing that, your body and mind are going to connect into a point of stopping because you're picturing it and imagining it so vividly that it literally makes you feel like you're stopping as you're looking at the stop sign. And then from there, you transition to your picture perfect relaxation place. For me, one of the places that I go to in here is a river. I like the way that the water sounds on the rocks. It gives it this noise that, and my wife should joke because when we go like to the mountains or I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina, so when we go to like Hanging Rock, I'll find these places. And then she's like, don't stay there too long, you'll fall asleep. And I do. There's something about, that noise that comes from the river, the smell of the air where I can close my eyes, I can picture it even with eyes open and think about how calming it is. And then it creates this body and mind reaction that soothes me and relaxes me. So that's the exercise there. You start with a stop sign, then you go to the next one. By the end of it, you notice that your symptoms have reduced. Hence why it's a coping skill, because it reduces the severity. So from your end, I want you to think about what's your place. After that stop sign, where are you going to go? And be able to really picture it. Picture it and utilize the 5 senses, right? Eyes, sight, smell, hear, touch, and so forth. So this concludes our video, and I will see you in the next one.